The San Francisco 49ers are on the hunt for a defensive coordinator. Vic Fangio will not be that guy. He is being hired by the Miami Dolphins, and it's time for the Crocker Senior Bowl report as he is now back from Mobile, Alabama on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Locked On NFL. Sorry, my computer's lagging there a little bit. Croc, as you can tell if you're watching this on YouTube, is blacked out. He's got no power in Monticello, Arkansas. So you come back from
the whole town.
That's crazy. So like down power lines and all kinds of craziness going on in Arkansas right now. I guess it's your turn for some storms after what Californians went through for the last month or so. So yeah, but you saw a lot of prospects in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. So I'm going to pick your brain on some of those guys, maybe some potential San Francisco 49ers that get started in the draft around pick 100, but a lot of late day 2, early day 3. There's prospects that come out of the Senior Bowl all throughout the draft. So the 49ers will likely be drafting 1 or 2 or 10 of those guys that Crocks saw this week in Mobile, Alabama. First order of business, though, is the defensive coordinator position for the 49ers. This is pretty important. The 49ers have had 2 really good ones that have gone on to get head coach jobs. And as reported, it was reported last week that Vic Fangio was very interested in the Miami Dolphins job. But I find it interesting, Croc, that he waited. He waited to interview for the 49ers job. And so that tells me he was at least interested and wanted to have that conversation. And it's something we've been talking about for a long time, kind of predicting that DeMeco Ryans was going to get a head coaching job this offseason, and that Vic Fangio was kind of hung around the team a little bit and, was golfing with John Lynch in the summertime, that he might be the guy for the 49ers. And he's a well-respected, one of the best defensive coordinators we've seen in the NFL for a while, and has done that very job very well for the San Francisco 49ers in the past. But in the end, after talking with the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan did not hire Vic Fangio. Do you get the feeling this is Fangio saying, okay, we talked about it, I'm going to go to Miami. I like the weather or the tax benefits or whatever better there? Or do you think it was Kyle Shanahan saying, no, I don't want to run a 3-4 defense or whatever?
I was going to ask you, have you been to Miami?
I've never been to Miami. I've been to Florida, not Miami.
Well, after going, and I was there a few weeks ago, I could see why he would choose signing with Miami over being with the 49ers. And I'll kind of leave that at that part from the off-field stuff, man. It's a vibe. It's been cold out here in Monticello, California. You have decent weather during this time. It was 80 degrees when I was there. I ran on the beach with my shirt off, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's probably an easy sale for the wife as well. And that's one part, people forget about when it comes to coaching. It's not just you and moving around. You're moving around with your significant other, with your wife. So, you're going to do what's best for you, of course, and, and for the long term. But, you want to make the wife happy as well. And I know if I was taking a job, I'd say, hey, babe, here are the 2 scenarios. These are the 2 teams. If you had your choice, where would it be? If my wife said Miami, obviously you do your due diligence and you have to make a legit business decision that's best for you. But, man, I could see why Miami. But, I do think it was more so just maybe fit. I did hear Kyle Shanahan talk about the scheme and different things. We talked about these 2 guys, right? And the 2 different defenses, right? You got the 3-4, you got the 4-3. And then really the biggest difference is standing up some guys, right? With Nick Bosa, with the kid at USC, Drake Jackson. You'd have to stand those guys up and then maybe add that traditional nose tackle and have Armstead play more of that 3-4 in, and maybe even Kinlaw play 3-4 in as well. Maybe he'd be better at that. So I don't think it's as big of a shift as people think. You could make that adjustment, but I wonder if that is something that kind of played out. Where Kyle specifically likes the defense that the 49ers runs.
Yeah, the vibe I got is he wanted continuity. Kyle did not want to lose a bunch of coaches. So that'll be interesting. So it sounds like he might be playing hardball with DeMeco Ryans too and not losing a bunch of coaches. So does that mean he's going to hire from within? Real quick, just talking about Fangio. I do think the 3-4-4-3 is a little bit too overblown because teams are in sub so much. Then you have 4 down linemen. It's like, Nick Bosa can play 3-4 outside linebacker just like Aldon Smith did, right? I mean, it's not an issue. It's not a problem. He's an all-pro dude, and he would be awesome in that scheme. And he would have his hand in the dirt more times than he would be standing up anyway. And I kind of think the 49ers need a nose tackle anyway. So that wouldn't be necessarily the worst thing if that's what happened. And defenses are so multiple. We've seen how the 49ers scheme has changed from Saleh to DeMeco Ryans. And it's like, it's hard to even say what their base defense really is, right? Because they show some looks and then they'll move guys around. They play a little bit of everything. They play some zone. They play some man. And Vic Fangio is the same way. He's pretty multiple. Does a lot of cover 4 stuff. But there's a reason a lot of his disciples around the league. And so I hope, and I caught some flack on Twitter. Some people got mad at me, and I didn't say this is the case, but I hope it's not necessarily that it's not straight scheme that Kyle said no to Fangio if he indeed did say no to Fangio. And I definitely hope it's not like an ego thing where Kyle's like, okay, this is an old, well-respected guy that maybe has too loud of a voice. Because I do think Kyle Shanahan, both good and bad, is a little bit of a control freak, and he is
a little bit of a control freak.
He's a bit of a control freak, and he probably doesn't want someone to come in and be like, "All right, Kyle, I'm gonna run the defense, you do the offense, and we're good." Yeah, I think he wants to be the top of the pyramid and wants control over as much as he can. So for that reason, maybe he does go with an internal promotion as he has done in the past.
And we talked, threw out some names of guys that it could be. We are going to talk about DeMeco Ryans and some of the guys that he requested to interview. So do you have the names of any of those guys?
I do have the names of those guys. One more aspect of the Vic Fangio thing too is, and I think this might even probably, now that I think about it, be the number one issue for Kyle Shanahan, is someone wanting to come in and bring all of their own coaches in. Because I think it sounded like Kyle Shanahan wanted to bring keep a lot of his own coaches. Yeah. So that might have been a big one too. And he's like, oh, I want to bring in Ed Donatell, and I want to bring in all these guys, and I want to bring in Tom Sula or whatever. Probably not Tom Sula, but to coach D-line. And that might have been something where Kyle's like, nah, I want more continuity. I want to keep as many of these coaches around as I can. So
you're going to have some of the same guys as far as the defense goes, right? I mean, there's not going to be a whole lot of turnover there. They know the scheme. They understand the scheme. Obviously, they do a great job of executing this game. It feels like almost no matter who's out there, they do a really good job. So, yeah, you want to keep as much of that together as possible and not have to change the language and what these guys are used to. Because I can tell you this, defensives, a lot of guys run similar schemes, but if it is something that's completely different and you're using different verbiage, man, I mean, it takes a while to kind of grasp that and truly understand what it is that this coach wants. Like right now, whatever defense they've been running between DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh is very, 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 very similar. DeMeco Ryans might have his own little twist on certain things that he kind of, like from when his playing days. But for the most part, the scheme in at its core is very similar.
Yeah,
and you change that, it could change the way guys. You don't want your guys thinking too much and having to learn something totally different. If you have the chance to keep it as similar as possible.
And it's like the details, right, Crocks? So like maybe where to be, you're lining up in this coverage and doing this, but maybe in this scheme, you're supposed to be shading here instead of shading over here. And just little small details like that might change things. And then, if you're playing a step slow, that's one of the big things that DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh's defenses have both done is play really fast. And it's hard to play fast when you're thinking.
I think the best way to explain it is for those of you who have, changed girlfriends, right? Say you had a girlfriend for 3 years. You know everything about that girl, right? You know how she works, the things she likes, things she doesn't like. You understand how to maneuver or whatever, how to make her happy, whatever it is. You get a new girlfriend, there's this filling out process, and it takes a while, right? It's not something that just happens overnight. Obviously, you go through the honeymoon stage. Oh, great. But then when it's like, oh man, I have to truly understand this person and how they think. That's a process, So it's very similar with coaches, where this one coach and you know how he does things, and if you can keep as much of that together as possible, you should do that. And I like Kyle's thinking on that.
And I'm sure everybody out there has friends that have a type, right? A certain type of person that they find attractive or that they're always attracted to. And I guess it's just like, yeah, I'm a 4-4. I'm a 3-4 guy. I'm a 4-3 guy.
Yeah.
No, I guess I'm a 5-2. There's some 5-2s happening around the league now as well. So next, let's talk about some names. Let's talk about some names for the 49ers job that they're interviewing. Let's talk about some names of that the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans, has requested to interview from the 49ers staff next. And of course, some Senior Bowl chatter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire the qualified candidates more efficiently, find the candidates that you want to talk to faster, match these open roles with people who have the skills, the values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. And DeMeco Ryans and Kyle Shanahan could probably both be using LinkedIn Jobs right now, because these are really important hires that these coaches are going through at this portion of the NFL offseason. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond the resume using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Croc, did you happen to catch any of the DeMeco Ryans press conference with the Houston Texans today?
I did not. How was it?
Dude was so impressive. I was blown away. Like we've heard DeMeco Ryans talk a little bit, but like I can totally see how he could blow away these job interviews and have been the number one candidate for so many teams. Like it was one of the best opening press conferences I've ever seen for a first-time head coach. You remember Tom Sula? And like people still think to this day that he farted during the press conference.
He did fart.
Yeah. And Nick Sirianni, I mean, he's going to the Super Bowl now, but Nick Sirianni had a really weird press conference. Remember Chip Kelly when he got hired? He didn't even have any. He just wore sweats. Not to the interview or not to the press conference, but when he flew to San Francisco, or Santa Clara, all he had was like sweats. He had to go find a suit really quick, and everything was like thrown together really fast. DeMeco Ryans, he was sitting there with Cal McNair, the owner, and Nick Sirianni, the GM, and his answers were so good. And I saw the chat from Texans fans. They were really ready to run through the wall. It was super impressive. Like Texans fans, I think, are going to be ecstatic hearing him talk. Now they got to go do it and put that team together. But it was a really impressive press conference by DeMeco Ryans.
They gave him a 6-year contract. So do you think it's similar? Like he learned from the situation? Listen, experience is so key. When we talk about, we'll get into the quarterbacks and stuff like that. One guy with no experience and the other guy that does have a lot of experience. I think with DeMeco Ryans, he's learned from some of the things that went on with San Francisco. Like they gave Kyle Shanahan a 6-year contract from the start. You have 6 years to turn this thing around, which you had to do that because the previous two coaches were each fired after 1 year. It was a terrible situation. You had to tear down the entire roster. And I think the Houston Texans, it's a very similar situation where you fired two coaches back-to-back years, right? And it's a totally rebuild type situation. They did do a good job throughout the draft last year. They got some foundational pieces. But, hey, man, I need some stability. I need to know I'm going to be here for the long haul. So give me that 6-year contract. And I think he might have learned from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in that whole situation.
He talked about that. He talked about so many things he learned and what he was going to take from the different places he'd been. He talked about what he's going to learn from Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers organization. And he talked about Gary Kubiak was his first head coach when he was with the Houston Texans. Talk about what he learned from him and how important it was to build the right culture and be accountable and all these things and be a man and you know all these really great lessons. And then I forgot that when he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, he was coached by Andy Reid. So I mean that's a pretty solid group of head coaches that he's either played or coached with in his career. Like Kubiak, ton of success. Andy Reid, is a Hall of Fame head coach, and Kyle Shanahan is like on the Andy Reid path, like
Right.
pre-Super Bowl win right now, So, and then Chip Kelly came over to the Eagles after that, and he said, it's funny, the thing he said he would take from Chip Kelly was the innovativeness and utilizing, cutting edge technology and those things. And so he didn't mention anything else though. So, it's smart. So yeah, he talked about taking really important things from all the places he'd been. It was a great press conference. But he's also that dirty dog is also trying to steal some coaches from the San Francisco 49ers. And according to Aaron Wilson, who covers the Houston Texans locally there, he said the Texans have interest in 49ers pass game specialist and secondary coach. He was Cory Undlin. And Cory Undlin, for their defensive coordinator position. Cory Undlin was the defensive coordinator for the Lions for one season, so the 2020. So yeah, obviously not a great team. So his defensive coordinator resume isn't great. But I would say if there was a promote from within for the 49ers, Cory Undlin would probably be the top guy on the list for the 49ers as well, just because of the experience. He's coached for 20 years. He's been a defensive coordinator for a year, and they could simultaneously give him play calling duties, defensive coordinator duties, and then give someone like Daniel Bullock a raise to that pass game's secondary coach specialist sort of a role as well, and keep both of those guys around. And the key there is also, if the 49ers wanted to promote Cory Undlin, I would guess that he would stay with the 49ers, not only because of familiarity and a better team, but because he would be able to call the plays. And I would expect that DeMeco Ryans wants to call the plays with the Houston Texans, even though he's bringing in a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, you got to, again, following in Kyle Shanahan's footsteps. And what's one thing Kyle Shanahan did? Hey, I got an offensive coordinator and this guy named Mike McDaniel, but I'm still going to be calling the plays. And especially until you kind of get guys to truly understand what it is that you want them to do, I would do it that way. Because look at what not DeMeco Ryans, Robert Saleh did. He got a defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, and day one is like, all right, you are the DC, you're the guy, and I'm just going to be the CEO of this whole thing. And that's great, but I think you have to truly establish, like, the side of the ball that you work on, the thing that got you the job. Can you get that set up and set that culture, and then go ahead and kind of delegate things to these other guys?
And we've seen that in the past with like Andy Reid and Bruce Arians, where they are the play caller and they try to let someone else do it for a while. And then it's like, it's kind of never as good as when they did it, and so you don't want to run into that either. But when you're a head coach, there's so many other things to do. And I thought that was pretty smart with Robert Saleh, if he believed in Jeff Ulbrich's ability to call the defense and call the plays. And it seemed like it's going okay on that side of the ball for the New York Jets. So we'll see if I don't have any indication yet on whether or not maybe DeMeco Ryans does that as well. So who knows if he's going to hire a defensive coordinator that will call plays, or if he's going to call the plays himself. On the offensive side of the ball, the Texans have submitted a request to interview 49ers pass game coordinator Bobby Slowick for their offensive coordinator position. And also the Commanders have requested to speak with running backs coach and assistant head coach Anthony Lynn for the Commanders' vacant offensive coordinator job. So a couple of big potential losses there. Like if the 49ers would lose like Undlin and Slowick and Anthony Lynn, like you're already losing a lot of guys. And then they might try to bring over some of the other guys underneath them from the 49ers as well.
Does it feel like as long as the 49ers have Kyle Shanahan as the head coach and he's the offensive-minded guy, everything else will kind of fall into place? Because he's lost a ton of coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, he's losing guys. He's losing coordinators. He's losing guys every single year. And it feels like overall, like the team still plays like the team.
Right. Yeah. And then he's found some gems that way too. Like, would he have found Brian Greasy if he didn't lose a whole bunch of coaches in the past? If Brian Greasy is really a gem, which it seems like the early returns are good, it's hard to know. That's the other thing with what we're talking about here with coordinators and coaches. It's really hard to know. And people always ask me like, oh, yeah, who's the next hot coordinator around the league? It's like, I have no idea. Like internally in circles, there's always these names that you see a lot, and they're hot names for a reason. But I have no idea. It's so hard to know exactly what goes on with some of these coaches behind the scenes.
And that's the whole thing. And I know we're going to get to this because I've been wanting to talk about this whole fire Kyle Shanahan thing. And, you got some people, oh, you how do you get better from him? And some people are like, oh, just can him. All right. But I will say this, there's always coaches that you haven't really heard of. And you'll hear about certain names, right? We always hear about the offensive coordinator over in Kansas City. And And you heard of Brian Daboll, and he's doing an amazing job with the Giants. But there are all kind of other names as well that you typically kind of you kind of hear but don't, like the Lions offensive coordinator, whoever he is.
Yeah, Ben
like,
Johnson.
He's killing it. Ben
Yeah.
Johnson, there you go, like killing it. Whoever just got that Vikings head coaching job and what he was able to do in that first year. So, I mean, there are guys that you maybe even if it's not a hot name to us because we hear the same retread names, but there are guys out there that it's like, hey, man, they're qualified. And if you have a good structure and kind of team around it, you can have some success. So I think Kyle, though, he is the structure. I think that's why there doesn't seem to be this huge drop-off, even though a lot of people early on were like, oh, he misses Mike McDaniel. Halfway through the year, it's like, I don't think he misses him anymore.
Nope. Right about the time the Niners played the Dolphins is right when people are like, maybe he doesn't miss him after all.
Right.
The one big name defensive coordinator that's still out there that from outside the organization that people are talking about is Steve Wilks, who most recently has been with the Carolina Panthers. He was the interim head coach there after being defensive coordinator this year and really turned around that season. It's funny how much of a win-win, by the way, that Christian McCaffrey trade was, because the Panthers not only ran the ball better after McCaffrey, but the whole team got better. And I think it's mostly because of the head coach than anything else. But he did a good job there as interim head coach for the Carolina Panthers. And then he was a one and done head coach after Bruce Arians with the Arizona Cardinals. So kind of raw deal, never really got a fair shake, I think, as head coach in the NFL, but it's still been one of the better defensive coordinators around the league. And I know the defense is what carried the Panthers recently as well. So Steve Wilks is definitely a name to look out for the 49ers defensive coordinator job as far as big names that people would recognize from the outside.
If they are going to go on the outside and get a defensive coordinator, man, I just like what he did with Carolina. And again, a lot of it being a leader of men and being able to instill a certain level of confidence in guys. And whatever it is that he did, he got those guys playing some football to where towards the end of the season, it's like, is Carolina going to make the playoffs? Right? So, at least as a defensive coordinator, I think that would be somebody who it feels like would be well received within the 49ers locker room.
Yeah, it's crazy that a defensive coach would become the interim and the offense gets better. Guys like Sam Darnold are starting to play a little bit more decent, right? So, and and for like DeMeco Ryans, it's so important that he gets a really good offensive coordinator in there, because I think it's harder to find an offensive coordinator right now in the NFL because the hot offensive coordinators are getting more of the head coaching jobs because it's so much easier to get a defensive coordinator, to have guys like Fangio and Steve Wilks even out there to be able to hire at this point in February. You're not finding that level of offensive coordinators. You're really trying to give guys their first ever shot to sometimes call plays, and they've never done it. And it can be a dicey proposition.
I think with everybody running somewhat of a similar offense right now, like half the league is running this heavy play action, heavy personnel set offense that kind of Kyle Shanahan and these other guys, and everybody has their little different things they do on it. But I think it's really more so about the players you have. And everybody doesn't have Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. Everybody doesn't have that. And I think that, Kyle Juszczyk, I think that helps a lot with the success that you have.
Absolutely. Let's talk Senior Bowl prospects. Croc was in Mobile, Alabama. Who caught his eye at Senior Bowl practices this week next? Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing hot taxes a lullaby. You get the idea. It's so much better to not do your taxes. Allow a professional at TurboTax to do them for you. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Croc. Who caught your eye at the Senior Bowl? Was there some future 49ers out there on the field?
Well, I think right away, and you start to kind of get the news about Purdy and his elbow, and you're like, 49ers, are they going to look to, even if it's late in the draft, find maybe a potential quarterback? And the names that come up, obviously Jake Haener. But I will say this, shout out to Jake Haener out of Fresno State. the guy who I thought, and I was there for 2 days. I didn't, day 3, I ended up driving back home. But the guy who I thought, man, I like how he's throwing the ball. I think things look good. And he still fits that Kyle Shanahan mold, which is not the biggest of guys, not the biggest arm, but, man, he kind of running his offense well, man. And it was Max Dugan out of TCU. I thought he just throwing those deep overs over the middle, like the ball came out of his hand with good velocity and that nice little zip. The timing was there. When he needed to step up in the pocket, he did so. I thought there were a lot of check downs, but I thought he did a terrific job of, you know what, I'm going to hit these kind of intermediate throws. And he was pretty consistent at that through the first 2 days.
Max Duggan, there you go. Yeah, TCU. They won a lot of football games at TCU, and I love that when a quarterback elevates the program. I think it's really important, and we saw that with Brock Purdy. Won a lot of big games. Guys like Desmond Ridder is who I liked about him last year. Max Duggan, one of those guys. I think Jake Haener is one of those guys as well, and Jake Haener is going to go probably later than a lot of local fans, and he's a Bay Area kid. He's a Fresno State player, so I know a lot of 49ers fans are going to really like Jake Haener, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for 49ers maybe to draft a rookie in this class to make sure they've got enough bodies in camp. Maybe even you stash him on a practice squad, but he's 6 feet even, 208 pounds. It's really small for a quarterback, so he's not physically impressive, doesn't have a big arm. He's a little bit of an older prospect, had some injuries as well, so a lot of things working against Jake Haener as a prospect, but that fits just fine for the 49ers because the later he goes, the better for the 49ers.
Right. And Max Duggan, that's a guy who I know some people are like, he's not going to be a quarterback at the next level, but he looks like a pretty solid quarterback at the Senior Bowl. I'm excited to watch him Saturday and just see what does it look like live. Because last time we watched him against Georgia, and I get it, Georgia defense, but he was completely overmatched. And I think just his offense in general, like it was just the entire offense. I mean, come on, it was Georgia, but much better going out there and what it looked like at the Senior Bowl.
But, man, even for them to get that far, for TCU to be in the place where they're playing against Georgia, it's crazy. He had a really good year numbers-wise, too. 63, almost 64% passer, 3,700 yards, 32 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Really had an awesome senior year. Yeah, a little athleticism, get out of the pocket, rollouts. I like that. The 49ers absolutely should. I would guess the 49ers add a rookie quarterback with this class, probably a veteran quarterback and a rookie quarterback, just to make sure they've got 3 guys heading into camp with an unknown of Brock Purdy's injury. And I would expect that to be a later pick. So we'll see when those guys go. You know how I feel about the 3rd-round running backs the 49ers have been taken, but I'll be darned if I haven't been super impressed by Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. Some of the clips I've seen from him, dude, is ridiculous. 5'9.5". 204 pounds, really important to get over that 200-pound mark because he doesn't look like the biggest guy. And maybe more of a 3rd down sort of a back, maybe a change of pace guy in the NFL. But, something like 2nd rounder, I don't think he's going to get to where the 49ers are drafting late in the 3rd round anyway. But how impressive was he in person?
Oh, very impressive. And really between him and Kenny McIntosh, both guys, like the running backs, those guys through the first 2 days were the most impressive players on the field to me. But, man, Tyjae Spears, that's a guy who dominated against USC in the bowl game. Everybody's looking at it like, Tulane, they're the underdogs in this game. They have no chance. And he said, watch this. I'm going to go run for over 200 yards. Really put this team on my back against a Pac-12 team. And not just that. If you look at what he did down the stretch, I know a lot of people not paying attention to Tulane and what's going on there, but they only lost a couple games all year. Like they were actually good. And he was a big reason why. The last, 6 or 7 games or so, felt like every game he was running for over 150 yards. So this is a guy that they were giving the ball to him consistently, carrying the load. If there's an area where he can improve, it's going to be that pass protection. And that's the issue for a lot of guys coming in out of college because they're just not asked to protect a whole lot. So I think he struggled a little bit early on during the Senior Bowl week with that. But overall, man, catching the ball, running the ball, seeing that breakaway speed, having nice twitch, he was really good. And then obviously Kenny McIntosh, the running back out of Georgia, he looked good as well. Every bit is advertised. I think at the end of day 1, he went down and grabbed his knee, and I'm like, oh man. And then it's not like you're getting these updates on the injuries, but next day he's got right back out there and still looking really good, catching the ball in the backfield extremely well. The vision was there. He's breaking long runs, and they're not tackling, but even then you could see what would be a big run, what wouldn't. And between him and Tajay Spears, man, both of those guys extremely impressive. 49ers definitely, the fans don't want to see them draft a running back in the third round. But those were two running backs where I'm like, man, these guys are good. They're good.
And the other thing to remember is when guys aren't getting hit, it can be a little misleading with the quick twitch guys. The smaller, quicker guys can look a lot better. And then when you get on the field and you're playing 11 on 11, it can be a little bit different when things start getting a little bit more physical. Our guys getting through releases and our, running backs able to run through arm tackles and those types of things. So always something to remember when you see highlight plays where it's like a guy on air or a one-on-one situation. I was pretty disappointed, Croc, to learn that Andre Carter II, 6'6", 252, outside linebacker, edge rusher out of Army, 34-inch arms, really looks the part. I was disappointed that he's not actually Andre Carter, former 49ers great's son. He's a different Andre Carter's son.
It sounds like he's built just like him, though.
Yeah. Exactly like him, basically. Yeah. Long arms, like a slender sort of a 3-4 outside backer, 4-3 end type of a guy. Did anybody stand out to you on the defensive side of the ball, Croc?
Oh, man, there were a couple guys. And real quick, back over to the offensive side of the ball real quick. Jaden Reed, receiver out of Michigan State, 5'11", 190 pounds. I thought he was twitched up, did a really good job of understanding how to set defensive backs up, get them going upfield, use their leverage against them, catch passes vertically down the field. There was one that everybody's kind of showing the highlight of it, but he was out of bounds. And now, Senior Bowl is NFL rules. So 1 foot doesn't count. So it looks good, and people are going to kind of skip over that one detail. But overall, I thought he did a really good job. And then on the other side of the ball, a guy who really challenging receivers throughout the 2 days I was there, Julius Brents, a cornerback out of Kansas State. And I didn't know until you told me that he was a 6'3" corner, 6'3", 202 pounds. But I thought he moved well. He played with terrific anticipation and kind of reminded me of a 6'3", 200-pound cornerback 49ers had in the past, which Akello Witherspoon, who had a terrific skill set as well, didn't have the physicality aspect of it, maybe that physical mindset that Kyle was looking for, but maybe Julius Brents does, and he was one of the leaders. You can see him kind of out there first, going through the drills. A lot of times it was him kind of leading the way for that DB group. But he was a guy I was impressed with, and it's even more impressive that I did not know he was as tall as he is. Because a lot of times, if I know that you're really tall, that's not great because your movements are longer. The change of direction isn't quite as well. The reaction, you got to try to defend certain type of receivers, and you struggle against other types. But none of that occurred to me, so I think that's a good thing.
Hey, look, the 49ers have all these comp picks. Maybe a player could be traded. The 49ers could get up to, maybe even the second round area, late second even for some prospects. So don't sleep on the prospects that you think are going to be completely gone before the 49ers draft at around pick 100. And as we know, Croc, every single year, the draft is way more bonkers than any mock draft you're going to actually see. So there's going to be some guys that fall and some guys you think you don't have any opportunity to get. Maybe the 49ers will have an opportunity to get. I love some of those names, though, you're bringing up.
Everybody talks about, anytime they see a mock draft, oh, this is terrible. Oh, that'll never happen. And like you said, it's even crazier than whatever we think is going to happen.
Always, every time. Yeah, every single time. The real draft is absolutely bonkers. All right, good stuff. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen. Hopefully, Croc's got his power back on for Monday's episode. I guess we got to go live here and do our first off-season live, Croc, because we didn't do a keys to victory, unfortunately, on today's episode, although there's no Super Bowl this weekend anyway. But we got to go live to talk to the folks and really talk about everything going on with the 49ers offseason. We're going to start digging deeper into all of the free agents the 49ers have, free agents the 49ers could bring in, looking at each position by position in the offseason. Of course, a whole bunch more draft conversation and some coach movement as well. Croc and I will be back next week right here, Locked On 49ers.